On this episode, I visit with former UM superstar, Todd Widom.
They're playing FSU today, and I'm going to that game, and I expect them to demolish them once again.
Hey everybody, I'm Tarek Merchant. This is the IMRecruitable show. I'm here with Todd Widom, a good buddy of mine now that I've been spending sort of the last almost 10 years in Florida, and I think we met, 2012 through Robbie Menard, our friend, who told me, here's a guy you got to meet, and you were working with one of his former players from Canada, and I knew that when we first had our conversation, an initial sort of conversation, that we had the same mentality and thought process. So clearly, you know, that's transitioned into a really good relationship and helping each other's programs out. So for all the people listening, I want you to give Todd a couple-minute background about, you know, your story growing up as a tennis player, all the way from your college to how you got on the pro tour and what you're doing today.
Sure. So, well, first of all, I was born and raised here in South Florida, and I was trained by a couple of very well-known Argentine coaches that were disciplinarians. They were training a couple of the world's best players at that time, so it was a very special time for me as a 6 or 7-year-old to come through their system and be able to see and witness and actually play with some of the best players in the world at a very young age. So obviously that was very exciting for me to be around that on a daily basis. So I went through my junior tennis, and then I accepted a full scholarship to the University of Miami to actually play for Jay Berger, who was one of those professionals that I grew up watching in that beautiful tennis system that I was brought up in. So that was an easy transition, and I played 2 years at University of Miami. I turned pro in the summer of 2003, and I played the ATP Tour for 6 years. And when I got off the tour, I started my own little private system here in South Florida, and that was in the summer of 2010. And as of right now, the results have been fantastic, and I'm enjoying each and every day going about my business with my select students that I train in my private system.
That's awesome. I know you've had tremendous success. What always resonated with me when we talked was, okay, I like to help kids, and as my business does, we get kids into college, and they're coming to me, you know, maybe grade 10, but generally 11th graders, 12th graders. They've been training and playing tennis their whole life, or their sport, and now they want to go to college, and they say to me, these are, you know, the 10 or 20 dream colleges I want to get to. This is where I want to play. Often, those colleges don't always resonate with their tennis level, and so I want to talk a little bit about taking a step back and what you do with these players when they come in younger and they're training and they have the aspiration to be a college player or a pro player. What can they do to set themselves up so that when they come to organizations like myself, or they come to that time in their career when it's like, okay, it's time to go to college, most likely, and we'll get into why college is good versus pro for many players, but how do they prepare for that? Because often they're not prepared.
Well, depending on their age, you want to start with a great foundation. And what do I mean by a great foundation? This is for the youngsters that are just starting to play tennis and maybe getting their feet wet in tournament play and getting used to training every single day. Well, maybe not every single day, but maybe 5 days a week, or maybe 5 days a week plus some weekend tennis as well. Is that the foundation is important. What do I mean by a foundation? Foundation is the swings, the grips, the movement, the physicality. Those things you want to set as young as you can and make sure that's proper so that the mechanics stay the same throughout their tennis. Now, there may be some tweaks here and there throughout the years, but you don't really want to be making any major changes as a player is 15, 16, 17, 18 years old.
Right.
So that's what I'm seeing, and really that was the basis of my business when I started coaching in 2010, was that I had to spend a lot of time with just a couple of these select kids in my private system to really fix them up to go to a great college. And so when you start with a great foundation, you're off to a great start, and then you can start really progressing into other areas of tennis, which is learning how to compete properly, learning the proper mentality, learning the proper discipline, the concentration for longer durations than what I'm seeing most kids possess at the current time.
Right. Okay, so if a player's, the ideal process for a player starting when they start tennis, let's say, or they start getting competitive into tennis? What is the ideal sort of process to take where they might say, okay, you know, my dreams or goals at this moment is to be the best player I can be, either get to one of the top colleges or be on the pro circuit. What are they doing as a player in the development side? What do they need to do?
Well, first,
it's a tough question because, like,
sure. Well, it's all depending on the age as well. So many
walk me
kids,
through the youngest all the way.
sure.
To the
So
older ones.
maybe most kids that are becoming very high-level college players, they may have started tennis maybe 8 or 10 years old, somewhere around there. It could have been 6. It could have been even earlier.
Yep.
But usually maybe 6 to 10 years old. What I think is that, first of all, the workouts have to be fun. If you're not having fun, this is not right. A parent shouldn't be pushing you into this. The child needs to be having fun on a daily basis, or else the reality of them becoming a college player and really sticking to it as they become 16, 17, 18 years old, it might be a little iffy for them. But first, you need to make it fun. Second, they need to be challenged. And what I mean is that the workouts need to be productive. So the child needs to be learning on a daily basis, not just going out, hitting a lot of balls and maybe breaking a sweat and having tons of kids on the court. That's not productivity. What's productive is that they're learning on a daily basis. And what do I mean? I mean, they're learning the proper swings and the grips and the physicality and the movements and learning how to maybe compete in some drills and those types of things. To me, that's crucial. If you miss that stage, you're going to be behind the whole time that you try to go through the process of going on to play college tennis.
So what's wrong with today's system, let's say, in a general? Because I know you're very vocal about it. We discuss things. But I think, you know, to most families that I come across, there's a lot of frustration, or, you know, maybe they don't understand, you know, what their child, or even for the athlete, where they need to be in order to get to those types of colleges or to get on the pro tour. So what is the issue we're facing right now, especially in the United States with the tennis development?
Well, I think the reality, and what's great today is you have two systems, tennis recruiting and you have UTR, that tell you where your kid is really at. When I was going through the development of tennis and everything, you got maybe a couple ranking lists a year, and that's how you based whether you were doing well or not, or going forward, or maybe going backwards, or maybe people were leaping you in rankings and those types of things. But today, I mean, we don't really have enough time for me to go into this, but for everything that I think about, but I think that we have masses of kids, and I don't know if there's enough individual attention to each child, and that's why I run my business, and I'm not going to this isn't really an advertisement for my business, but it's very small. So these kids are monitored every single move they make, every swing they make, every time they play a point tactically. These things are monitored. They're not just going out there and not having productive practices. If you're having that, then other players, I'm sure, are, and they're going to be ahead of the development curve.
Right. So I'd like to think what you're explaining is kind of like you go to school too. So when you're in first grade, in order to graduate first grade, there's a syllabus or a certain number of things you need to achieve in order to get to grade 2, and that teacher's in charge of preparing you by training you in the daily classes and then testing you, and then you're testing to become, you know, have good enough grades to get there. Would you say tennis development is a parallel to that?
You're 100% correct. The way that I look at it is you have a couple of options. You can go to a system where you could be with masses of kids, right, which may be a public schooling system,
right,
where you may have 40 kids in a class, or you could have something private or much smaller, and maybe there's 5 or 10 or even a private lesson. So it all depends what you're looking for. It really depends how serious you are, and then also there's cost involved, right? So it all depends on what your budget is for your child to develop into the best player that they can become.
So let's say you're working with a limited budget. You can't afford the fancy private school or the fancy training system that gives you that hands-on approach that obviously makes sense. You get more attention, and that person is focused on your development. What does that player do? How can they help themselves? Because I think you were in a bit of that similar position.
Absolutely. I mean, quite honestly, I did not have the funds. My family went through some very difficult times when I was about 12 years old. So I was working already at that age. And what do I mean by working? The second I walked into the club, I was stringing rackets. I was sweeping tennis courts. I was used as a hitting partner for for adults and for players that probably shouldn't have been on the court with me, right? But that was my way to try to see how good I could become. It was a way for me to get out of a tough family situation. And so that, and I knew tennis was what was going to eventually be my career. So I looked at it for me as a life and death situation. So every day I went out there, I tried my best, I did my work, I was used as a hitting partner, then I would hopefully go with the coaches that were training me. And for me, it was fantastic because it got me out of a tough situation outside of the courts. Now, that's not everyone's situation,
right.
But in terms of development and being mature for my age and having the value of money and understanding these things, it was absolutely priceless.
How do you make your players understand how hard you need to work, how many hours or the amount, the focus you need to have in your training and the discipline you need to have to get to a high level? So you became one of the top players in the NCAA. You became a top 200 pro. Achievements that most players will never even come close to making. So how do you translate that to your players and to anybody that you're giving advice to and saying, look, if you want to get to where I'm at, where I was at, let alone you want to be top 10 in the world and win a Grand Slam, what's that advice you give to these kids?
Well, before any child enters my system, they go through a very thorough assessment, and it's a tough assessment. And they're going through very tough drills that many have a lot of trouble enduring. They have to build up to a full day of training with the players that I'm currently training. But if they can come with a great attitude, if they can come with a great work ethic, be open for advice from myself and my partner is one of the most well-respected coaches in South Florida for the last 35 years, who was one of the Argentine coaches that trained me from when I was 6 to when I retired from the tour at 26.
Right, Pierre Arnold.
Right, Pierre Arnold, very well-known guy. So those are the things that I look at.
Okay.
If the child doesn't possess those abilities or mental skills, or if they would not like to do it, then it's going to be a tough time for them in my system, and they know that. And that's why I don't call it a tennis academy. I call it a very small little private system, because I'm looking for a certain mentality that I want to spend my day with. That's what I look at, really. And they don't have to be a superstar.
Yep.
And I've had some amazing players, but I've also had some medium or lower level players. But if they can bring that on a daily basis, I love to be there with them.
Okay. So going into exactly what you said with the different levels of players, I think one of the hard realities that we start to face as you get, into your latter years of high school is that, and the same thing happens in a transition in college, because you go in high school and you say, all right, I still want to be a pro and I'm a certain level, and then you get to college and you get your scholarship, or you get recruited to a great school, and then that same aspect of I want to do it, then you get to that second, third year and you realize, well, maybe it's not going to happen for me. So with different levels of players, right, out there, what are these people, when are they starting to get realistic on these approaches? When are you starting to realize, okay, where am I going to fit, and what can I do to best hone my skills as they are and be the best player I can be?
Well, I think the reality starts to happen maybe in the freshman and sophomore year of high school, right? Many of the coaches are already looking at sophomore tennis players, which that's even younger.
Yeah.
That's younger than when I was coming through the juniors in the late 90s. Okay, so the kids are younger, and then when you're on their paper and they have you listed, now they're looking at you in your sophomore year and your junior year, and they want to know if you're progressing, and they're looking at your results. And it may be a tough reality for some, but in college tennis, that's a business. Just like many of the parents are going to listen to this, they're running their business, I'm running my business. So the college coaches, they need to try to produce the best team that they can, and they have goals and what they want to try to achieve on a yearly basis. And it's not fun and games, it's a business.
Yeah.
So I think the juniors and the parents, they need to understand this.
Yeah, totally. It's hard, right? Because like as a parent, we're both got young kids now. Everybody's kid does, you watch them and you think they're doing brilliant things, but in reality, there's a lot of competition out there, just like in anything you do, the business world, the college, recruiting business, or whether you're a player, and realize that sometimes, like, you know, you may want to be a pro, but maybe you're just not going to get there. And, you know, so what route do you take? And I think that's always a challenge for people to come to that reality, but there's so much good in it, right? Like, I mean, you played college for 1 year, or was it 2?
I went 2 years.
You went 2 years, that's right. And so 2 years, and then you did the pro tour. I'm sure that you have some great memories from your college days, and would you even trade that for anything?
Well, I loved every second of it. For me, being around the guys, being in an unbelievable sports school, and knowing that it was going to be a stepping stone for me to become a professional player, it was a fantastic experience. Yeah, I don't really have a lot of negativity about it at all. It was an amazing experience. I got to play college tennis 50 miles down the road when I was a little kid, and I watched University of Miami have unbelievable football teams. I said I wanted to go there and one day, right?
Yeah.
And I ended up there. But how much work did it actually take? Well, from 6 years old, I was training hours every single day from when I was 18, and I hit my stride at 16. I was playing pro tennis at 16. So it then became a reality that I could go to University of Miami and do some great things, and then it was a great stepping stone for me to become a professional player. And not only that, the head coach at the University of Miami was a former top 10 tennis player on the ATP Tour. And it was a guy that I looked up to that was hitting balls with me when I was 6 or 7 years old. So for me, it was just such a fantastic time and such an exciting time for me in my life.
Yeah, and recently, you've had a player that I've gotten to know too, who unfortunately couldn't get to the school he wanted to as his first choice, but still ended up somewhere great. It's going to be somewhere great. And so for those people who don't get the perfect storybook ending, like, what's the message to them?
Well, I mean, the particular player that you're bringing up that's been living with me for 3.5 years, I wanted him to go to Miami. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
I wanted him to be 50 miles away, but you know what? There wasn't, scholarship available and it didn't work out. No problem at all.
Right.
But looking at each individual in my system and what would be the best scenario for them to achieve their goals in college and then hopefully post-college, we found the next best solution and guys that I trust, and we're going to be heavily involved in his development as a person and a tennis player. So for everyone involved in this young man's life, we think it's fantastic and it's a very exciting time for him.
Awesome. And, how did you make the decision between going to college or going pro? I mean, you had a good, successful junior career. You won the clay courts, right? You were one of the top players in the country, if not the top at one point. How does a person decide whether they go pro versus college?
So you don't want to put pressure on people, but it's result-based. Okay, if you're having trouble in junior tennis, to skip college and go to pro tennis is a big risk. It's going to take years and years and years of money, development, time, effort, so much that to maybe give it a chance on the professional tour. For me, it was more of a financial situation, not really a tennis situation. I started playing pro tennis at 16 years old, and I was playing guys 200 and 300 in the world and competing very well with them at 16.
Yeah.
So it was more of a financial situation to not turn pro at 18, and I didn't win Kalamazoo. I lost to one player that gave me fits my whole life. But he beat me, this guy, Alex Bogomolov, who made it to 30 in the world.
Alex, if you're watching,
yeah.
Todd's coming for you.
Alex, good job. You had a great career. But so anyway, so I didn't achieve my goal, and I had goals of winning Kalamazoo, and I didn't. I came in 3rd place. Well, is that a disaster? To me at that time, it was a disaster. Because the way that I was training and my goals and dreams was to be the best in the country. The rankings said that I was #1 at a time, best in the country, but I didn't play that main draw U.S. Open that year. I didn't win Kalamazoo.
Right.
So Alex turned pro and I did not. We were neck and neck, and he was a little better than me. He was just, throughout our career, it was a tough guy for me to play against.
Sure.
That's just the reality.
Right.
Sometimes the matchups are tough for, for some players and easier for others.
Which actually changed the course of your decisions to some degree, right? Which happens.
Well, of course. If I would have won that tournament, maybe I would have taken, at that time, it's much higher now, but at that time it was $10,000 minimum just to show up and play.
That's right.
And play the main draw of the U.S. Open. So for me, it was just more of a financial situation that I couldn't really afford to go out there and do it properly on the ATP Tour, so that the next best option was to stay local in South Florida, have Pierre keep monitoring and keep developing me, as well as Jay Berger. And then when I was ready and I achieved my goals in college tennis, then it was time to turn pro. So, but there were goals that were met. And that's really kind of the basis of your question, I think.
That's right.
There were goals, and when they were met, we moved on. And when they were not met, we stayed in the division. We stayed maybe at the same level of pro tournaments or whatever it shall be. We did not skip steps. And whether I achieved those goals quicker than others, that's fine. It's great that you're maybe achieving those quicker, but we went step by step by step.
Right. No, it's fair enough, and obviously it worked out really well for you. You had such success at UM, and then even on the tour, and things happen. And you know, I think that's where it comes back to, is that every player is looking to achieve the ultimate results. Are you willing to put in the effort? Do you understand how much work you need to put in to get there? And then are you monitoring your progress, and are you setting the goals and approaching it the right way, right? And I think that it's easy to say I want to be a pro, right? It's easy to say I want to play at Duke or, you know, Stanford or UCLA or whatever the school is of your choice. But can you get there, and what are you going to do to get there, not just say it, right?
Well, the real question is, how much work is really involved to be playing at a phenomenal school, an ACC, SEC, you know, Big 10, Big 12, you know, those types of schools, right? How much work is actually involved? So I do have some players that could become professional players, and what are the hours they're actually putting in? So yesterday is a great example.
Okay.
From 6:30 to 8, and we were watching the sunrise over there, they already started with very tough physical training, right? So that was 6:30 to 8. Then they ate a meal, then they came to do tennis training from 9:15 to 11:30. Then after that tough session, they went and they had lunch. The next session was then 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. 1 to 3 was tennis. 3 to 4 was another physical training session. So the people that are listening to this,
Yep.
right, this may be a little mind-blowing to you, but this is a normal day. And then after they finish their last fitness session, now they have maybe an hour of recovery so that they don't lose range of motion and they can recover properly, and so that they don't have a big risk of injury. There's a staff of doctors around my players that if they ever get a little nicked up or banged up, they're in their office immediately to get treatment, and they're back at it again. And that's really a very, very serious player that could potentially play at an unbelievable school or potentially become a professional player.
Yeah. Todd, that's unbelievable advice. I mean, I always love having these chats with you and listening to your experiences and your knowledge that you have, and clearly it's a proven method because you've been there, done that. Thanks for inviting me here to Parkland at Todd's beautiful facility here, and he's got his golf cart. He's also a pretty good golfer, so if you ever come out here and you're a golfer, take him up, but I doubt they'll beat you, right?
The home course, I'm okay.
Yeah. All right, well, enjoy the UM game today. I know you're still a huge fan. Thanks so much for everything, and you know, we'll catch up soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Tariq, for this interview.
Time.
Thanks, man.